I'm putting the case forward for Barley Varieties and agronomic packages. In the north, Barley Agronomy comes under the variety-specific agronomy packages. South, it's a Southern Barley Agronomy, and in the west, it's the Western Barley Agronomy project. So they're all GRDC funded. In the north, it's GRDC and New South Wales DPI funded. So just a bit of background. So we're going through a transition period in barley breeding and agronomy. Got a lot of new varieties coming through, sort of transition period. You tend to have, barley varieties tend to be fairly stable over time. They don't tend to change, you tend to have national varieties. But since 2012, we've had 9 new malt accredited varieties come through. That doesn't include dedicated feed varieties such as Fathom. In addition to that, we've got 4 potential malt varieties being potential releases in the next 2 years. I'm talking about malt varieties because a lot of the new malting varieties are high yielding as well in comparison to the feed varieties, so it's sort of compared on a par really. The question is, which of these new malting and or feed varieties should I grow? And there's also another question in terms of barley versus wheat as a preferred cereal. Got crown rot considerations and root lesion nematode considerations as well as in your rotations and in terms of tolerance. So, got the question, what's new and what in the accreditation pipeline, and the question of barley versus wheat. So I'll just have a look here. So these are, since 2012, the 9 new varieties. A lot of them probably won't have a fit in the north. You tend to have more of the domestic malt focused varieties. You've got Granger, which is a medium fermentable, sort of a gardener type variety. Scopes are IMI tolerant bull oak, so basically fits in that Clearfield herbicide package, so just have to be aware of it in terms of following your product labels, particularly with maximum residue levels in some of the domestic and export markets, particularly into Japan. I've got Westminster. It performs, it's a high yielding variety too, particularly over on irrigation. It's a high to medium fermentability variety, so it's a gardener type in terms of its profile. Very high yielding. It's actually replaced Gardener in Tasmania, so that's another variety, but it's probably not going to have much of a fit in the north either. So just in terms of looking at these varieties, I thought I'd just mention since 1982 there have been 16 new varieties up until 2011, so they're accredited varieties. So you can see now that we're going through a stage where you've got a lot of varieties coming through. You've got to try and work out what the fit is, how they fit within your areas and potential management packages. So I'll just look at these ones that are coming through now. I've highlighted ones that are probably going to have more of a northern fit. So you've got Latrobe, which is a sister line to Hindmarsh. So that's so Hindmarsh only made food classification. It didn't actually get malt, even though it's sold into the Chinese market as a preferred malt variety, and it's a specific variety as well. So it's up for accreditation this March 2015. It has an export focus, but it does perform well. It's very widely adapted. We've got Skipper, also out of the University of Adelaide program. It's got a medium fermentability profile, performs well in short season variety, but does have probably some issues in terms of straw strength, high yielding environments. And then we've got Compass. This one's probably going to have a very good fit in the north if it gets through accreditation. It's in a seed increase position at the moment, and it's actually 2/3 Commander in its background, 2/3 Commander, and it's got County, which is an introduced European line, so it's improved, a bit of improvement in terms of its leaf disease profile. So it's up for accreditation in 2016. Just looking at 2014 at Narrabri, so this is exactly the same, virtually the same split plot design, and it was sown at where the wheat trials were sown. So we're just looking at a comparison of some of these varieties. So I just wanted to highlight some of the varieties in terms of time of sowing. So you've got Compass, performance very similar to Commander, but when you've got some of these longer maturing varieties, your Navigators, if you don't get that sowing window, you're losing, you know, roughly 1.6 tonnes there compared to your Compass, only 0.3. Longer in the window, you're looking at about 2.6, whereas you've got something like Fathom, it's only roughly about 0.8 of a tonne. So if you miss your sowing window, you have same issues in terms of your wheat varieties. Just interesting also in terms of looking at your grain quality and sowing window as well. So just showing, this is plump grain, so retentions above the 2.5 mil screen, which is typically used for looking at malt classifications in barley. You can see with Navigator, time one's okay, but then as soon as you miss that sowing window, if you go from the 23rd to the 15th, bang, you've got issues with grain size. Some of the newer varieties, your Compass, very good grain size, holds up across the sowing window in comparison to Commander as well. And you also got Skipper, good grain size across the sowing window, and Fathom, even though it's only a feed variety. And another interesting one is Granger. So it's sort of even though it's sort of a gardener type replacement, but you have to look at market fit in terms of where it fits and if there's a market. So Gardener's still the preferred malt variety, but when you look at some of these qualities, you can see that Granger holds up in terms of its less screenings, larger grain size. When you look at your Gardener, it drops way away as soon as you go into those later sowing windows. Just in terms of Granger, this is physiological leaf spotting. It is not a disease, a pathological disease. It's due to oxidative stress, and this is something that's fairly common. It was common last year in the south, where you had barley yellowing. You had a mild start to the season, and then you get the cool period, and then you tend to get these thumb spots. It's very varietal specific. I think Flaming, which was also a variety that came out of WA, had similar issues. You also find that varieties such as Gardener they tend to have smaller spottings, but no fungicide will do anything for that. So you just have to make sure you get diagnosis right, and don't recommend a spray for it. Just looking at, this is part of the, looking at these new varieties in terms of how they fit. This is what we call our National Barley Agronomy Project experiment. So it's run across the 4 barley growing states, or the northern, the south, and across in WA, where we're comparing varieties. So we've got these newer moulding varieties coming through. We've got standards such as your Commander and your Bull Oak, which is more of a southern variety. And we're just looking at seed rates. So we had 3 seed rates, 75, 150 and 300 plants targeting. And we also had 4 N rates, 0, 30, 90 and 150. So we're really pushing these varieties. So this is just the mean varietal response. So this is looking at overall varietal response. So you've got yield down the bottom, grain protein. You can see increasing yield, decreasing protein. So you get that yield dilution. But varieties such as Compass, this is at Nowley on the plains, performed fairly well, like 6.5 tonnes. That's across all the treatments. But you can notice some of the varieties performing a little bit differently in terms of grain protein accumulation. Bass tends to be a higher protein accumulating variety, but yeah, just something that's coming out of the project. Sort of looking at nitrogen response in terms of grain yield. We did have a variety by nitrogen interaction. Some varieties such as your Compass followed the tradition, like the grain nitrogen response curve, but then you've got some of these varieties such as Wimmera tended to be quite flat in their response, but that, and that's on a high end side as well, 123 kgs. Looking at grain protein, just looking at, particularly looking at 9 to 12% your grain protein receivables. You can see varieties such as Compass, Latrobe, Commander, Granger, sort of those higher yielding varieties. You've got to watch at the bottom end, the lower end of your grain specs in terms, so you can see some of these varieties are more responsive to nitrogen, whereas your Bass can run into issues at the high end. Just as this is something, we just had a look at some lodging scores as well, so this is a subjective one. 0 standing, 9's flat on the ground. This is talking about skipper in terms of its in high yielding environments. You can see that it does have issues in terms of its lodging potential. I just wanted to note that sort of Compass and Commander are sort of running fairly similar, even though particularly in these higher end environments, so you're probably going to be looking at Compass and Commander performing very similar in terms of they're managing the actual package. In a lower yielding environment, just wanted to show how Compass held up as well. So this is looking at just grain yield, Compass, and as you'd imagine, Skipper, an early maturing variety, did well as well. Latrobe and Commander, sort of all-round performer. Now, with looking at this nitrogen response in a lower yielding environment, you can run into problems with grain protein concentration at the upper end. You can see these varieties here, your Compass, your Granger and your Commander, are all sort of getting into those grains protein requirements, so in that area, whereas some of these other varieties, your Bass, which is tends to be higher protein accumulating, had issues, so it's sort of way out of the specs. Now, this is just an interesting one. We had a mention about earlier on about wheat had issues, particularly some of the early maturing varieties, your Spitfires and Darts. I think Spitfire was a 30% decrease from time 1 to time 2. This is at Narrabri, where, and Dart was a 40% decrease. You can see in this one here where the barley varieties, so they're treated as two separate trial sets, but they were treated in terms of actual management. They had the same in-crop management. You can see that the barley generally has greater frost tolerance because it flowers in the boot, and you can sort of get that 2% frost. It's not as sensitive. It has a 2% frost difference to wheat, so it's more tolerant. You can also see at the other end of the scale, early maturing, like faster maturing varieties, so the yield potential holds up there as well. The other thing we looked at, this is part of the Steve Simpfendorfer's Crown Rot Epidemiology national project. So we're looking at, so we're just looking at here at 20 replicated trials, 2009 to 14, where trial plots were inoculated with crown rot. So we're looking at barley versus wheat. So out of these 20 replicated trials, 50% of the trials comparisons, barley was roughly about 0.95 of a tonne of a hectare yield advantage over Gregory. In 30% of the trials, there was no difference. And 13% of the trials, Commander actually had a yield increase. Barley tends to have an escape mechanism whereby, because of its early maturing, it tends to get through grain fill before it runs into moisture stress, which a lot of the wheats tend to have issues with. There is also a note that barley and wheat varieties do vary in yield response in the presence of crown rot infection, but also to remember that barley is very susceptible to crown rot So we're looking at, this is actually looking at tolerance. This is a trial at Garah, so it's, this one's at Bill Yates's. So we're looking at barley varieties versus your wheat varieties. You can see some of these longer maturing varieties, your Oxford and Granger, sort of comparing, running the same as Gregory and your Sunmate. But then you up the upper end, you've got your Hindmarsh, early maturing variety, out yielding any of the wheats. It's interesting, this low Lancer performed quite well there. That's a lower biomass variety, so that's just something to consider anyway. And that these are one-off trials, but that's something to consider. Tamworth, a high yielding environment. You can see all of the barley varieties were above Gregory. Oxford, a longer maturing variety, was the only variety that was outside of the difference in terms of yield response. But you can see up here your Latrobes, your Hindmarsh, your Compass, all outperforming your wheat varieties. A few take-home messages. Time of sowing trials highlight the ability of barley to maintain yield across a wide sowing window. We've got new longer season varieties that may have a fit in the north. So you've got your Granger, Navigator, but the importance of sowing window is essential. You've got Fathom, which is out of a sister line of Fleet. Performs well across a wide lot of environments, has long coleoptile length and is quite adaptable. Compass is going very well. It's agronomically similar to Commander, but has greater adaptability and yield potential. Latrobe has good adaptability and yield potential. It's a sister line to Hindmarsh, so you'd expect it to follow very similar in terms of its agronomic performance. Skipper looks like a fairly handy type of early maturing variety, short season, but has issues in high yielding environments. I'd just like to acknowledge the GRDC and New South Wales DPI, and to acknowledge the two projects, so the variety specific agronomy packages and the National Crown Rot program. Do you have any questions?